She sat quietly in the back row of the old town hall, her fingers moving slowly along the wooden cane resting on her lap. The place smelled of polished floors and fresh flowers, and she could hear the low hum of voices all around her. It was the biggest day of her life, and though she could not see the lights or the grand piano standing on the stage, she could feel the energy in the air. Her name was Lena, and she had been waiting for this moment since she was a child. It was the national music competition, something she had only dreamed of joining. The sound of shoes clicking across the floor, the applause for each contestant, the faint shuffle of sheet music, it all painted pictures in her mind far more colorful than anything her eyes could ever show. She had been blind since the age of 6. A sudden illness had taken away her sight but not her spirit. When the world went dark, she found light in music. Her father used to say, "You may have lost your eyes, my little one, but your soul still sees through sound." Those words became her guide, her way of understanding everything around her. Now, she was moments away from playing in front of hundreds of people, judges, musicians, and one man whose name everyone whispered about. He was a world-famous pianist known for his unmatched skill and his sharp tongue. People said he could make or break a career with a single word. Lena didn't know his face, but she had heard his voice many times on television, speaking about music with authority and pride. As the competition went on, Lena listened carefully. Each performer played with passion, filling the hall with grand symphonies and soft melodies. She could tell who was nervous, who was confident, and who was lost halfway through their song. She didn't need eyes to sense emotion. It came to her naturally through the rhythm of every note. When her turn was finally called, she felt her heart skip. The announcer's voice echoed through the microphone, calling her name with a hint of surprise, as if wondering whether she would actually appear. The room grew quiet, and the sound of her cane tapping the floor seemed to echo endlessly as she walked to the stage. People in the crowd began whispering. Some felt pity, some felt curiosity, others felt disbelief. The judges looked at one another, unsure of what to expect. The famous pianist leaned back in his chair and sighed. "A blind girl?" he muttered under his breath, not realizing that the microphone caught his voice faintly enough for many to hear. "This is a serious competition, not a charity performance." The words cut through the air like a blade. A few people in the audience chuckled softly. Lena froze for a moment, her hand tightening around her cane. She could feel every heartbeat echoing in her chest. But she didn't turn away. Instead, she reached out with one hand and found the edge of the piano bench. With careful movements, she sat down. The pianist on the judging panel leaned forward. "Do you even know where middle C is?" he said with a smirk. The hall filled with quiet laughter again. Lena didn't answer. She placed her fingers gently on the keys, her palms trembling slightly. She took a deep breath and listened. Not to the crowd, not to the judge, but to the silence. She knew that once the music started, everything else would disappear. Her fingers found their places, guided not by sight, but by memory and feeling. Then, without another pause, she began to play. At first, the notes were soft, almost hesitant, like the whisper of wind through the trees. Then slowly, the melody grew stronger, flowing like a river. Every note carried emotion. Grief, hope, love, and pain, all wrapped together into something beautiful. The audience that had once laughed now sat completely still. The mocking pianist lifted his head, his expression changing as he listened. The tune seemed to tell a story without words, a story of a little girl who had lost her sight but found a new way to see. It was as if the piano itself was speaking for her. Lena didn't play like others. She didn't think about technique or perfection. She played with her whole being, letting her heart guide her hands. The melody rose and fell like waves on an unseen ocean, and every sound touched something deep inside those who listened. Her father used to tell her that each note had a color. Though she had never seen colors, she imagined them. Warm golds, soft blues, deep reds. As she played, she could almost see them in her mind, swirling and dancing in front of her. The more she played, the clearer they became. When the final note echoed through the hall, it faded into a silence so deep that it felt sacred. Lena sat still, her hands resting gently on the keys. She didn't need applause to know what she had done. She could feel the weight of the silence, the stillness that only true emotion could create. Then, slowly, the sound of clapping began. One person, then two, then an entire room. Within seconds, the hall was filled with thunderous applause. People stood to their feet, cheering for the girl they had once pitied. Some were crying, though they didn't know why. Something about her music had reached them in a place words never could. Lena smiled faintly. She stood up carefully, bowing her head in gratitude. She could hear the host speaking over the microphone, trying to speak but pausing as his voice cracked. When she turned to leave, the famous pianist stood as well. He didn't speak at first. His pride seemed caught somewhere between admiration and shame. Finally, he said quietly, "That was extraordinary." Lena nodded gently. "Thank you," she said softly. And then she walked off the stage, her cane tapping lightly on the floor. Backstage, the noise of applause still echoed behind her. One of the young assistants came rushing up, tears in her eyes. "You were amazing," she said breathlessly. "They'll talk about this forever." Lena smiled again, her face calm and peaceful. "I just played what I feel," she replied. "That's all I know how to do." As she waited in the quiet dressing room, she ran her fingers over the piano keys of a smaller practice instrument. Her hands trembled slightly. She knew she had done something special, but what truly mattered to her was that she had honored her father's memory. She could almost hear his voice in her mind saying, "Play the way you feel and the world will listen." Meanwhile, outside in the main hall, the famous pianist sat alone at the judges' table. He couldn't explain the feeling that had taken hold of him. For years he had prided himself on perfection, on flawless technique and control. But when he heard Lena play, he realized he had forgotten something simple and pure. As he looked at the piano, he whispered to himself, "She played without seeing, yet she saw more than all of us." That night, Lena didn't win the competition. Officially, the prize went to another performer, someone with years of training and perfect sight reading. But in the hearts of everyone who had been there, she was the true winner. Her performance spread quietly through recordings and word of mouth, reaching people who had never seen her face but could feel her spirit through the music. In the days that followed, news outlets wrote about the blind girl who silenced the hall. Some called it a miracle. Others said it was a lesson in humility. For Lena, it was simply her truth. Music was her voice, and she had finally spoken it to the world. Late that night, after everyone had left, the famous pianist returned to the empty hall. The lights were dim and the grand piano still stood at the center of the stage. He sat down and pressed a single key. The sound echoed faintly, reminding him of the melody she had played. For the first time in years, he felt tears in his eyes. He realized that true greatness had nothing to do with sight, fame, or reputation. It came from somewhere deeper, from pain, love, and the courage to share both. As for Lena, she went home quietly with her mother, carrying nothing but her small trophy of participation. Yet inside, she felt like she had won something far greater, something that no award could ever represent. She had shown the world that you don't need eyes to see beauty, you just need a heart brave enough to express it. That night, as she lay in bed, she placed her hand over her heart and whispered softly, "Papa, I did it. I played for you." And though the world outside was silent and dark, inside her the music never stopped. Days passed after the competition, but the sound of applause still echoed in Lena's mind. She could hear it whenever she touched the piano, soft like a memory that refused to fade. Life went back to its slow rhythm, but something inside her had changed. The hall where she once felt small now felt like a door that had quietly opened to something new. She didn't win a trophy or a medal, yet her story had already started to spread. Someone from the audience had recorded her performance on their phone and shared it online. By the end of the week, thousands of people had seen it. Then millions. Messages began pouring in from around the world. People said her music made them cry, made them smile, made them believe again in something they had forgotten. Real feeling. Many said it reminded them of someone they had lost or a dream they had buried. Lena didn't fully understand how something so simple could reach so far. To her, she was just playing the way her father had taught her, to listen to her heart. But while the world praised her, Lena stayed the same. Every morning, she sat by the small window of her house, letting the sunlight warm her face as she practiced. Her mother would bring her tea, sit quietly nearby, and listen. She never said much, but her silence was full of pride. One afternoon, while Lena was practicing, her mother walked in holding a letter. Her hands trembled slightly. "This came for you," she said softly. Lena took the envelope, running her fingers over the seal. She recognized the sound of expensive paper, the smooth texture of something important. Her mother unfolded it and read aloud. It was an invitation from the National Conservatory of Music. They wanted Lena to visit, to meet the staff, and to talk about a scholarship. They said they had seen her video and were deeply moved. Lena smiled, unsure what to say. A scholarship for me? Her mother nodded, tears filling her eyes. Yes, they want to hear you play again. They said they've never heard anything like it. The next week, Lena and her mother took the train to the city. The ride was long and filled with the sound of distant conversations and the soft hum of wheels against the track. Lena loved it. Every sound painted a picture in her imagination. The landscape rushing by, children laughing, someone humming quietly in another seat. When they arrived, the city felt like a different world. The air smelled of perfume, fuel, and something metallic. Cars honked in the distance and people moved quickly, their footsteps sharp and busy. Lena held her mother's arm tightly as they made their way to the conservatory. The building was huge, filled with echoes. Lena could tell just by the sound of her shoes against the marble floor. She felt small again, but this time she wasn't afraid. They were greeted by a kind man who led them to a practice hall. The moment she touched the piano keys, she knew this was where she belonged. The instrument was smooth, the sound deep and rich. After she played, the room was quiet for a long time. Then someone spoke. "You play with something we can't teach," a woman said gently. "You don't follow notes. You follow emotion," Lena smiled faintly. "That's the only way I know how to play." They offered her a place at the conservatory, full scholarship, private lessons, and a chance to perform again, this time at an international event, but not everyone was happy about it. One of the senior teachers, who had once studied under the same famous pianist who mocked her, wasn't pleased. He thought it was unfair that a blind girl who couldn't even read sheet music was given such a chance. "Talent is one thing," he said to the others, "but music needs structure, not pity." Lena didn't hear his words directly, but she could sense the tension whenever he entered the room. He spoke with politeness but carried an edge in his tone, the kind that made her heart tighten. Still, she practiced every day, spending hours feeling the keys, memorizing every sound. Her world became the space between notes, the invisible distance where feeling lived. One day, while she was practicing alone, the door opened. She recognized the footsteps before the man even spoke. It was the same famous pianist who had mocked her at the competition. For a moment, neither of them said anything. She heard the soft click of his shoes and the faint sound of his breath as he stood near the piano. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said quietly. "I didn't expect you to come," Lena replied with a small smile. He sighed. "I came because I needed to." He paused, then added, "That day at the competition, I was wrong. I thought skill was everything. But when you played, you reminded me what music really is. You made me realize I've been playing for applause, not for meaning." Lena turned her head slightly toward his voice. "Music isn't about what others hear," she said softly. "It's about what you feel when you play." He nodded, though she couldn't see it. "You taught me that," he said, "and I want to make it right. If you'll allow it, I'd like to help you prepare for your next performance." Lena hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no to prove she didn't need him. But another part of her knew this was not about pride. It was about learning, about sharing. So she agreed. From that day on, he became her mentor, but in truth, he was the one being taught. He watched her move her fingers across the keys without hesitation, as if she could see more than anyone else. She spoke about music like it was alive, something breathing and changing with every feeling. Sometimes she asked him questions that left him silent. "What color is sadness in your mind?" she would ask. Or, "Can you hear joy in a minor chord?" He had no answers, but she did. For Lena, sadness was blue, soft and heavy. Joy was golden, light and full. She could describe every emotion as if it had shape and color. Together they practiced for weeks. Slowly, word spread that the once arrogant pianist was training the blind girl he had once ridiculed. Some people laughed. Others found it beautiful. He didn't care. He saw in her what the world had made him forget, the innocence of pure music. One evening, after a long practice session, he asked, "Do you ever wish you could see again?" Lena thought for a moment, then shook her head. "I used to," she said softly. But now I think I see more than most people. I hear the world differently. I feel people's moods through their voices, their footsteps. And when I play, I don't imagine faces. I imagine hearts. Her words stayed with him long after he left. As the weeks passed, Lena's playing reached new depths. Her next performance was only a month away, and it would be broadcast internationally. She was nervous, but ready. Her mother often sat in the audience during practice, listening quietly. Every time Lena finished a piece, her mother would clap softly and say, "He would be proud of you." And Lena would smile. She didn't need to ask who he was. Her father's presence was always there, in every note she played, in every pause between songs. One rainy night, just before the final rehearsal, the famous pianist came to see her again. He stood at the doorway for a while, listening as she played a new melody, one he had never heard before. When she finished, he asked, "What's that piece called?" She smiled faintly. "I haven't named it yet," she said. "It's for the people who laughed and for the ones who believed. It's for the world to listen." He nodded slowly, realizing that her music had become more than sound. It was her way of healing the world, one note at a time. The night before the big event, Lena sat alone by the piano, tracing the edge of the keys with her fingers. She whispered quietly, "I'm ready." Outside, rain tapped softly against the window. The sound reminded her of her childhood, of nights when her father would hum lullabies beside her bed. Back then, she thought the rain was singing just for her. Now she knew. It still was. As she played one last song before bed, her mother watched from the doorway. There were no lights on, no audience, no applause. Just a blind girl and her piano, lost in a world only she could see. And even in that quiet, unseen room, her music reached beyond walls, beyond time, into hearts that would one day remember her not as the girl who couldn't see, but as the girl who helped the world listen. The morning of her next big performance arrived quietly. The city was covered in a thin layer of mist, and the streets glistened under the early light. Lena stood by her window, her fingers tracing the smooth wooden frame, listening to the distant hum of cars and the faint call of birds. She couldn't see the world waking up, but she could hear it coming alive around her. Her mother entered the room softly. "The car will be here soon," she said. Lena turned her head toward her, voice smiling. "I know," she whispered. "I can feel the morning. It's calm today." Her mother came closer and fixed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You look beautiful," she said. "Your father would have said the same." Lena nodded, her eyes lowering. "I hope he's listening," she said softly. The concert hall they were heading to was one of the grandest in the country. It was the same place where the famous pianist had once made his debut years ago. Now he was not there as a performer, but as a mentor, and more importantly, as a believer in Lena. When they arrived, the sound of busy footsteps and voices filled the air. Lena could tell it was a large crowd by the echo that bounced from wall to wall. People whispered her name as she walked past, some in admiration, some in disbelief. To many, she was still the blind girl who amazed everyone. She didn't care for titles. She just wanted to play. Inside the dressing room, her mentor stood by the piano, waiting. His tone was calm but serious when he said, "This is your moment, Lena. Don't think about the audience. Don't think about the cameras. Just play like you're talking to your father." She smiled. "That's the only way I know how." As she prepared, he sat down beside her. There was a long silence before he spoke again. "I want you to know something," he said. "I've played on this stage many times, but today I feel like it belongs to you." Lena shook her head gently. "Music doesn't belong to anyone," she said softly. "It just passes through us." He nodded, realizing once again how much she understood the heart of music better than anyone he had ever known. When the announcement came, she could feel the vibration of applause through the floor. Her mother squeezed her hand before she went up. "Play with your heart," she whispered. Lena stepped onto the stage slowly, guided by her mentor. The sound of the crowd was overwhelming at first, hundreds of people waiting in silence. She reached the piano and felt for the bench, sitting carefully. The smell of the polished wood filled her senses, familiar and comforting. For a moment, she did nothing. The world was quiet. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Then she placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The first few notes floated through the hall like a whisper. Then came the melody, gentle, rising, and full of emotion. It was her own composition, one she had written for her father. Every part of it held a piece of her life. The darkness she had lived in, the warmth of her mother's voice, the laughter of children in the street, and the sound of rain on the roof during lonely nights. As the music filled the hall, people closed their eyes without meaning to. It was as if the melody pulled them into a world where sound painted pictures more vivid than sight ever could. Halfway through, her mentor, standing quietly off stage, found his eyes watering. He had played thousands of times, but never had he heard anything like this. There was something in her music that made the world stop and listen. When she reached the final part of the song, the rhythm slowed. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from emotion. She pressed the last note gently, holding it for a few seconds before letting it fade into silence. No one moved. The hall was completely still. Then slowly applause began, soft at first, then louder until it became thunderous. People stood to their feet. Some shouted her name. Others wiped their eyes. Cameras flashed, but Lena didn't see them. She simply bowed her head, her hands still resting on the piano. When she walked off the stage, her mother was waiting with tears in her eyes. "You did it," she said, her voice breaking. Her mentor stood behind her, speechless. For once, the man who had always known what to say could find no words. All he could manage was a quiet, "You made everyone believe again." Lena smiled. "I only played what I felt." The performance was broadcast around the world. Within days, people were sharing clips, writing articles, and talking about the blind girl whose music touched something deeper than perfection. But fame was never what Lena wanted. She didn't care for interviews or photos. She only wanted to keep learning, to keep playing, to keep reaching hearts through sound. One day after the concert, her mentor invited her to his home, a place filled with instruments, old records, and memories. He told her he wanted to show her something. He led her to a small room where a grand piano stood by a window. "This was my first piano," he said. "It was where I learned to play. It's been silent for many years, but I want you to have it." Lena shook her head in surprise. "I can't take that," she said softly. "It's not a gift," he replied gently. "It's a reminder. This piano gave me everything I have, but I forgot how to feel through it. You helped me remember, so please, let it live again in your hands." Lena hesitated, then reached out and ran her fingers along the edge of the piano. The wood was old, but the keys felt warm, almost alive. "Then I'll play it," she said. "But you have to promise me something," he smiled. "Anything. Promise you'll never play for applause again," she said. "Promise you'll play for yourself the way you used to when you loved it." He nodded slowly. "I promise." After that day, they practiced together often, not as teacher and student, but as two souls speaking the same language. Sometimes they didn't talk at all. They just played. Months passed, and Lena's music began to travel far beyond her small world. She was invited to perform in different countries, on stages where people from every background came to listen. But no matter where she went, she never forgot her roots. The quiet nights with her father's voice in her memory, the feeling of the old piano under her fingers, and the sound of her mother clapping softly in the corner. She often wrote letters to her mentor while traveling. In one, she said, "When I play for people, I don't see faces. I see lights. Every heart in the room feels like a small flame, and together they make the darkness beautiful." Her words touched him deeply. He framed that letter in his study, next to a picture of his younger self on stage. It reminded him every day that music wasn't about perfection. It was about connection. One night, during a charity concert, Lena dedicated her performance to everyone who has ever been told they can't. She told the audience, "I can't see, but I can hear love." And that's enough. The hall fell into silence before she played. The melody that followed was different this time, gentler, wiser, like someone who had lived through pain and turned it into peace. Her mentor watched from the audience, proud and moved. He realized something that night, that Lena wasn't just a pianist. She was a mirror reflecting what everyone else had forgotten. That life's most beautiful moments come from struggle, not perfection. After the concert, reporters gathered around, asking how she managed to move people so deeply. Lena simply said, "I don't play to impress. I play to express." In the days that followed, She turned down several offers from large companies that wanted to use her story for promotion. Instead, she began teaching music to children, especially those who couldn't see. She told them stories of sound and touch, teaching them that music wasn't about reading notes but feeling them. Her mother often watched her during lessons, sitting quietly at the back. Every time she saw those small hands on the piano, she remembered her own daughter at that age, alone in a world of silence and darkness, yet somehow never afraid. Now that same girl had become a light for others. Late one evening, after everyone had gone home, Lena sat alone at her piano. She began to play softly, the notes flowing gently into the quiet night. She didn't know that her mentor had stopped outside the door listening in silence. He didn't interrupt. He just stood there, smiling to himself, realizing that she didn't need the world to see her brilliance. She was already whole, already free. Her music wasn't about her blindness, it was about her vision, and as the final note faded, she whispered softly, "Papa, I hope the whole world can hear what you taught me." Somewhere deep inside, she felt that he already did. The next few weeks after the concert were a blur for Lena. Her performance had spread across the internet, touching hearts far beyond what she could imagine. Videos of her playing filled social media, and people wrote comments that made her mother cry each time she read them out loud. "Her music made me believe again. She plays like she's talking to heaven. I've never felt something like this before." But Lena didn't see herself as someone special. She still lived simply, waking up early, practicing and spending time with her mother and her mentor. The world outside might have changed, but her small apartment still smelled of morning tea and old sheet music. What did change, however, was the phone that never stopped ringing. Reporters, producers, and concert organizers all wanted her to play again. Some offered money, others offered fame. But Lena listened quietly and said the same thing every time. "If it's not for a cause that helps others, I'm not interested," her mentor often told her. "You have a gift and people want to see you. I want them to feel, not just see," she would reply softly. "If they only watch, they'll miss the message." One morning, as the sunlight filtered faintly through the window, her mother placed a letter in her hands. "This one came from across the ocean," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Lena ran her fingers along the envelope, feeling the raised edges of the foreign stamp. "Who's it from?" "A music foundation in Europe," her mother said. "They want you to perform in Vienna. It's the same place where your mentor once played when he was young." Lena smiled faintly. "Vienna, the city of music," she whispered. Her mentor nodded proudly. "It's where the greatest pianists in history have performed. And now it's your turn." The thought both frightened and excited her. She couldn't see the grand halls or the lights, but she could imagine the sound of the audience, the echo of the piano, the hum of anticipation. Still, doubt crept into her heart. "What if I fail?" she asked one evening while her mentor tuned the piano beside her. He stopped and looked at her quietly. "Fail? You already succeeded when you played with your heart. Failure only happens when you stop believing in the reason you began." His words stayed with her. That night, as she sat at the piano alone, she placed her fingers on the keys and began to play softly. It wasn't practice this time, it was reflection. Each note carried her thoughts, her fears, her memories. And somewhere in the middle of it, she found peace. The decision was made. She would go. As the day of travel drew closer, people from her small town gathered to wish her well. They brought flowers, cards, and gifts. Some hugged her and whispered, "Make us proud." But Lena only smiled shyly and said, "I'll play for all of you." Her mentor accompanied her to Vienna, along with her mother. It was her first time flying so far from home. The hum of the airplane fascinated her. She imagined the clouds outside, the vastness of the sky. Her mother described everything gently, painting pictures with words. "It looks like a sea of white cotton," she said. Lena laughed softly. "I can hear it in your voice," she replied. When they landed, Vienna greeted them with cold air and distant church bells. The streets were cobbled and busy, filled with the sound of footsteps and chatter in another language. Though she couldn't see it, Lena could feel it, the rhythm of the city. The next morning they visited the grand concert hall where she would perform. The hall had high ceilings and a floor that echoed with every step. Lena walked slowly, using her cane until her hand touched the piano that stood at the center of the stage. She ran her fingers across it, feeling the smooth surface, the cool metal edges of the pedals, the familiar touch of the keys. Her mentor stood beside her. "Do you know how many legends played this same piano?" he said softly. Lena smiled. "Maybe," she said, "but it's never heard my story before." They spent hours practicing. The hall's acoustics made every note sound deeper, more powerful. Lena could feel the music rising and falling like waves around her. It felt alive. Between practices, they took small walks. Her mother described the city, the statues, the carriages, the street musicians. Lena listened closely to every sound, building pictures in her mind. "It sounds beautiful," she said one evening. Her mother squeezed her hand. "It is," she said. "But you're even more beautiful when you play." As the concert day approached, excitement built around the city. Posters with her name appeared across the streets. The blind pianist who touched the world, performing live for one night only. The tickets sold out in hours, but Lena stayed calm. She didn't read the news, didn't care about the cameras waiting. Her only focus was the music. On the morning of the performance, she sat quietly by the hotel window, listening to the city wake up. Bells rang softly in the distance. The sound reminded her of home, of the small clock her father used to wind every morning. She smiled. "I hope you're listening," she whispered to the memory of him. That evening, the concert hall glowed with golden light. The audience filled every seat. Some were famous musicians, others students, and many were ordinary people who had simply been moved by her story. The air was heavy with silence and expectation. Backstage, her mother hugged her tightly. "No matter what happens," she whispered, "you've already won." Her mentor placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "Remember," he said, "you don't play for them, you play to them. Let them feel what you've lived." Lena nodded quietly, took a deep breath, and walked toward the stage. The sound of her cane tapping softly on the wooden floor echoed through the hall. When she reached the piano, the audience held their breath. She sat, took a moment, and placed her hands on the keys. The hall was so silent that even her heartbeat felt loud. And then, she began. The first note was soft, trembling like a whisper. Then came another and another until the melody began to bloom. It wasn't just a song, it was a story. Her story. It spoke of a little girl who lost her sight but found her light. It spoke of pain but also of hope. The music rose and fell like a conversation between her soul and the world. Some notes were heavy, full of sorrow. Others were bright, like laughter breaking through clouds. Her mother sat in the front row, tears running down her cheeks. Her mentor leaned forward, barely breathing, afraid to miss a single note. The music built into a storm, fast, emotional, unstoppable, and then suddenly fell silent, leaving a single soft note hanging in the air. It was as if time had stopped. The last chord echoed through the hall and faded slowly into silence. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then the applause began, quiet at first, then stronger, and finally thunderous. The entire audience rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, crying. Lena smiled faintly, tears slipping down her own face. She couldn't see them standing, but she could feel them. Their warmth, their gratitude, their hearts beating with hers. Her mentor walked to her side and helped her stand. "Listen," he whispered. "That sound, that's love." As the applause continued, Lena bowed gently and whispered to herself, "Thank you, Father. I did it." Backstage, people rushed to congratulate her. Journalists wanted interviews, producers wanted deals. But Lena only wanted a quiet moment alone. She sat in the dressing room, hands still trembling from the performance. Her mother entered quietly. "You were perfect," she said softly. Lena smiled. "Not perfect," she said, shaking her head. "Just honest." Her mentor joined them, holding back tears. "That performance," he said, "wasn't music. It was life itself." Later that night, as they walked back through the empty streets of Vienna, the air was cool and peaceful. Lena could hear the soft sound of distant violins being played by street musicians. She stopped for a moment, listening, smiling. Her mentor turned to her. "What are you thinking about?" She tilted her head slightly. "How music connects us," she said. "Even when we come from different worlds, it brings us together. Maybe that's what I'm meant to do." Her mother linked her arm gently through Lena's. "And you're doing it," she said softly. "Every note, every song, you're changing hearts." As they walked on, the sound of her laughter mixed with the night air. For the first time in a long time, Lena felt something she hadn't felt before. Peace, deep and full. The city around her glowed with light she couldn't see, but she could feel its warmth. The world, once filled with shadows, now seemed open and alive. She didn't know where her journey would lead next, but she knew one thing for certain. Her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt lost, forgotten, or broken, because through her music, she had shown them that even in the darkest places, there was always a way to find light. The soft sound of the plane's engine hummed in the background as Lena sat quietly by the window. Though she couldn't see the clouds or the wide blue sky outside, she could imagine them clearly in her mind. Each vibration, each gentle shift of air told her that she was heading somewhere far, somewhere her music had taken her. It had been months since her charity concert. In that time, invitations from around the world poured in, but one stood out above all, the one from Vienna. It was the same city where the world's greatest pianists had performed for generations. The same stage where her mentor had once been a young prodigy, and now it was her turn. When she landed, the air felt different, cooler, lighter, filled with distant sounds of bells and chatter in another language. She listened carefully as her mother spoke with the event organizers. Their accents were new, but their kindness was familiar. As they drove through the streets, Lena leaned her head against the window and smiled. She could hear music drifting faintly from street performers on every corner, violins, accordions, even an old man playing a harmonica. "This city sings," she whispered softly. Her mother squeezed her hand. "It's waiting for you to sing back," she said. The concert was only 2 days away. Rehearsals began early in the grand hall, a place with high ceilings and perfect acoustics. When Lena first touched the piano there, she could feel how powerful it was. The keys heavier, the sound fuller, deeper. Every note echoed through the vast room like it carried a memory of every musician who had played before her. Her mentor joined her later that afternoon. "So, this is it," he said quietly, his voice filled with pride. "The same stage I once played on. I remember trembling so hard I almost couldn't touch the keys." Lena smiled. "Did you?" He laughed softly. "Yes, but I pretended not to. You, however, don't need to pretend anything. You just need to play." They practiced for hours, perfecting the balance of her compositions. The piece she would perform was the one she had written herself, the song that carried her heart, her memories, and her father's voice. She wanted it to sound like a conversation between past and present, between pain and hope. That evening, when rehearsal ended, they stayed back for a few minutes. The hall was empty now. Only the faint echoes of the piano remained. Her mentor stood beside her quietly. "You've come a long way," he said. "Do you ever stop and realize what you've done?" Lena tilted her head slightly. "No," she said softly. "I don't play to look back. I play to move forward." He nodded. There was something so peaceful in the way she spoke. It reminded him that she didn't need eyes to see how far she had come. She could feel it in the hearts of those who listened. The next day was calm, but full of quiet preparation. People from all over the world began to arrive. Journalists, musicians, students, and critics. They had all come to see the blind girl who had touched the world with her music. Lena spent most of the morning alone, sitting by the window of her hotel room with her hands resting on her lap. She could hear the city outside, the sound of horses on the cobblestones, children laughing, and church bells ringing softly in the distance. She smiled. "It's a good sound," she whispered. "It feels like home." Her mother came in and sat beside her. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "A little," Lena said honestly. "But I think nerves mean I still care." Her mother laughed quietly. "You always cared too much," she said, brushing her daughter's hand gently. That night, sleep came slowly. Lena lay awake, listening to the ticking of the clock and the faint sound of rain outside the window. She thought about her father, the warmth of his voice, the way he used to hum beside her. In her mind, she could still feel his hand guiding hers on the piano keys. Play what you feel, not what you see, he used to say. And that was exactly what she planned to do. When the day finally arrived, the hall was packed. The stage lights glowed softly, casting long shadows across the polished floor. The audience was silent, waiting. In the front row sat her mentor and her mother, both holding their breath. As Lena walked onto the stage, guided by an usher, the sound of her cane tapping gently on the floor echoed through the hall. The audience watched, their hearts heavy with admiration and curiosity. Some had seen her videos online, others had never heard her before. But all were united in one thing: silence. Lena reached the piano and placed her hands on the keys. She didn't rush. She waited for the moment when the room's stillness became part of the music itself. Then she began. The melody started softly, almost like a whisper. Each note seemed to fall gently into the next, building slowly, tenderly. The piece spoke of loss at first, the pain of darkness, the quiet ache of missing someone. But then, gradually, it changed. The notes grew stronger, filled with warmth, as if a ray of light was breaking through the shadows. Every sound carried meaning. Every pause was a breath. Every touch of the keys was like a heartbeat. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. Her mentor sat still, his hands clenched together, unable to believe what he was hearing. He had thought he'd seen greatness before, but this was something beyond that. This was purity, truth, and emotion in its most human form. As the song reached its peak, the hall seemed to disappear. People forgot where they were. The only thing that existed was her music. Some closed their eyes, others simply watched, their faces frozen in awe. And then, with a final soft note, the melody faded. The silence that followed was deep, almost holy. No one moved. Then, like a wave crashing against the shore, the applause began. People stood. They clapped until their hands ached. They shouted her name. Some were crying openly. Lena smiled and stood, bowing gracefully toward the sound of their voices. She could feel the warmth of their emotions like sunlight on her skin. Her mentor walked onto the stage to guide her off, but before leaving, he whispered, "They'll remember this night forever." Later, in the dressing room, there was a knock on the door. A representative from the Music Foundation entered, speaking with emotion still trembling in his voice. "Lena," he said, "you've just made history. Your performance will be broadcast in over 50 countries tonight." Her mother gasped softly, covering her mouth in disbelief, but Lena simply smiled. "I just played what I felt," she said. That night, as the broadcast spread, the world listened. From tiny villages to large cities, people watched a blind girl who didn't need eyes to create beauty. Her name trended across social media, but she never even checked. She wasn't chasing fame. Back in her hotel room, Lena sat quietly at a small upright piano. The applause had faded, the lights were gone, and all that was left was the music she carried inside her. She played softly, a tune only she knew. Something gentle, something private. Her mentor entered quietly and sat beside her. "You did it," he said. Lena smiled. "No," she said softly. "We did it. You believed in me when others didn't." He looked at her, emotion heavy in his voice. "You taught me more than I ever taught you," he said. "You made me fall in love with music again." They sat there for a long time, saying nothing, letting the quiet fill the space between them. Outside, the city lights glowed softly, and though Lena couldn't see them, she could feel their rhythm. Through the glass, the heartbeat of a world she had just touched. The next morning, as they prepared to leave for home, she was handed a letter from a young boy in the audience. He was blind, too. The letter read, "When I heard you play, I didn't feel blind anymore. You showed me that we can still shine." Lena folded the letter carefully and held it to her heart. "That's why I play," she whispered. At the airport, people recognized her voice as she passed by. Some stopped to thank her, others simply smiled. She didn't need to see their faces. She could hear the warmth in their tone. As she boarded the plane, she leaned toward her mother and said, I think this is just the beginning. Her mother smiled. The beginning of what? Lena turned her face toward the sound of the sky outside. Of something bigger than me, she said softly. Of music that belongs to everyone. She rested her hands in her lap, feeling calm and fulfilled. Somewhere deep in her heart she could almost hear her father's voice, gentle and proud, saying, "You've done it, my little one." The plane rose through the clouds, and though she couldn't see the world below, she could feel its heartbeat, the rhythm of millions of people who had listened, understood, and felt what she had poured into her music. For the first time, Lena didn't feel like she was walking in darkness. She felt surrounded by light, light that she had created through the one thing that had never left her, her gift, her heart, and her song. Months passed since Lena's unforgettable performance in Vienna, yet the world still spoke her name with admiration and awe. Her music had reached corners of the world she had never dreamed of. From radio stations to school assemblies, people played her song, calling it the light beyond sight. But Lena herself didn't change much. She still woke up early every morning, still practiced quietly with her hands gliding gently across the keys, still smiled when she felt the vibration of each note in her chest. She never saw herself as famous. She just saw herself as someone still learning, still growing. Her mother often said, "You've become a symbol for so many." But Lena only shook her head. "I just want to keep playing," she'd reply. "If my music can make one person feel less alone, then that's enough for me." One morning, as she finished her practice, her mentor came to visit. His footsteps were slow, but his tone was full of excitement. "You've been invited again," he said, handing her an envelope. "This time it's not just to perform. They want you to teach." "Teach?" she repeated softly, her fingers pausing on the piano. "Yes," he said, smiling. "A special school for children with disabilities is opening a new music program. They want you to lead it." Lena went quiet for a moment. The idea touched something deep inside her. She thought of her younger self, sitting in silence, unsure if she'd ever belong anywhere. The thought of helping others like her, it felt right. "When does it start?" she asked simply. Her mentor laughed. "I knew you'd say yes." Weeks later, she arrived at the school. It was small but full of laughter and life. She could hear children talking, instruments playing out of tune, and teachers encouraging them patiently. The sound made her smile. It was the sound of possibility. When she entered the music room for the first time, the children went silent. They had heard of her, seen her videos, listened to her songs. To them, she was more than a musician. She was proof that dreams didn't need eyes to be seen. She sat at the piano and said softly, "Let's make music together. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to feel." At first, the children were shy. Some had trouble keeping rhythm. Others struggled to find notes. But Lena was patient. She never scolded or corrected harshly. Instead, she laughed with them, encouraged them to try again, and celebrated even the smallest success. Over time, the room changed. The air filled with music, sometimes clumsy, sometimes beautiful, but always honest. She taught them not just to play, but to listen to the world differently. "Music is everywhere," she told them. "It's in footsteps, in laughter, in the rain. All you have to do is hear it." There was one student in particular who reminded her of herself, a quiet boy who had been blind since birth. He rarely spoke, always sitting in the corner during lessons. Lena didn't push him. She simply let him be. But one day she placed his hands gently on the piano keys and whispered, "Just press one note." "Feel it." He hesitated, then pressed softly. The note lingered in the air. She smiled. "That's how it starts," she said. From that day, he began to play a little each time. Slowly, his confidence grew. And the first time he played a full melody, the other children clapped for him. He smiled shyly, whispering, "It sounds like light." Lena's heart swelled. "Yes," she said. "It does." Weeks turned into months, and the school became like a second home to her. She wasn't just a teacher. She was a listener, a friend, and sometimes even a comforter. Parents often came to thank her, tears in their eyes. They told her that their children had changed, that they smiled more, talked more, believed more. But Lena always said the same thing. "It's not me. It's the music. I just helped them hear it." One day she received a letter inviting her to perform again. This time, not in a grand hall, but at the very school where she now taught. The students wanted to perform alongside her. It would be their first public concert. The idea made her nervous but excited. She wanted her students to feel the magic she had once felt, the energy of an audience, the pride of creating something beautiful together. They practiced for weeks. The children worked hard, sometimes staying late just to perfect their parts. Lena guided them patiently, always reminding them that mistakes were just part of the song. On the evening of the performance, the small auditorium was packed with parents, teachers, and visitors from all over the town. The stage was simple, decorated with flowers and soft lights. Lena stood at the piano, her students beside her, some holding violins, others small drums or flutes. Before they began, Lena said quietly to the audience, "Every sound you'll hear tonight comes from a heart that refused to give up. These children taught me more than I ever taught them." The lights dimmed and the music began. The first few notes were soft, a bit shaky, but soon the children found their rhythm. Their instruments joined in harmony, and the hall filled with a sound that was pure and full of joy. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was alive. Lena played along, her fingers dancing across the keys. She could feel the pride of each child in every note, and as the final chord echoed through the room, the audience rose to their feet, clapping and cheering with tears in their eyes. The children hugged her tightly, laughing and crying all at once. It was more than just a concert. It was a moment of triumph. That night, as she sat alone in the music room after everyone had gone, Lena touched the piano gently. She thought about how far life had brought her, from a little girl sitting in the dark, unsure of her place, to a woman helping others find their light. Her mentor visited the next day. "I saw the performance," he said softly. "You've done something remarkable." She smiled. "They did it," she replied. "I just gave them a key," he chuckled, still humble as ever. Then his tone softened. "You've changed lives, Lena. You should be proud." She thought for a moment, then said quietly, "Pride isn't what I feel. It's peace." Years passed and her influence only grew. Her students became musicians, teachers, and advocates. Some performed across the world. Others stayed to teach at the same school. And every year they invited her to play the opening piece. Though her hair began to turn silver, her music never aged. It still carried the same warmth, the same honesty that had once silenced a room full of doubters. One evening, as she played alone after class, the quiet boy, now grown, came to see her. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "You changed my life." She smiled softly. "No, you changed your own life," she replied. "I just helped you hear it." He hesitated before saying, "The world calls you a miracle. But to me, you're a teacher who taught me how to see without eyes." Lena reached out, gently touching his hand. "Then my father was right," she whispered. "You don't need sight to see beauty." In her later years, Lena continued to compose. Her songs became more reflective, gentle pieces full of love, gratitude, and memories. Each one carried the story of someone she had met, someone who had touched her heart. The world continued to celebrate her legacy. Awards came, honors followed, but she never chased them. She once said in an interview, "Fame fades like sound after a final note. But kindness, that echo stays forever." And that's exactly what she left behind, an echo that continued to move through generations. Her students went on to tell her story to others, how a blind girl once played a song that changed how the world saw music. They spoke not just of her talent, but of her humility, her laughter, and her heart that never stopped believing. Years later, long after she was gone, her school still stood, filled with the sound of children learning, laughing, and playing. Her piano remained there, polished and cared for, as if waiting for her to return. And every morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows, the teachers would tell new students, "This piano belonged to the woman who taught the world that you don't need to see to touch hearts." In every note played on that instrument, her spirit lived on. In every child who found courage through music, her story continued. Lena's life was not about fame or applause. It was about connection, about turning pain into hope and silence into song. She had once been ridiculed, doubted, and pitied, but in the end she proved that true vision comes not from the eyes but from the heart. And so her music never ended. It simply kept moving from one soul to another, softly, beautifully, like a song that never stops playing.